That deserves a wow. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
How long have you been thinking about writing this book?
During the pandemic, I started to gather some notes, but I didn't know anybody would be interested. And then the HarperCollins people said, "Well, we've heard about all these stories, the usual sports stories, but then some of the other ones that you've been at were strange, an earthquake, World Series, and Olympic bombing, and you had to report through those live, along with Super Bowls or World Series. So, could you put something together? We think of the O.J. Simpson interview, and people would be interested in this kind of stuff. So, I would say within a year, I had some help framing it. The good thing about having done this work over ESPN and Fox, at least those years, there was video or at least articles and to make sure I was accurate. Sometimes my memory would fade a little. The guy researching the back said, "You actually said this in the moment of Dale Earnhardt's crash." I'm like, "Okay, that's what we're going to put in the book, and then I'll take you a little bit beyond that." So yeah, I would say about a year from writing, and then another year getting everything, pictures and the process out. So, but enjoyed it. It was kind of interesting going back over all the things through the years. It's like, wow, I got old pretty fast here.
No, you're one of the things I love about it, Chris, is that you're very comfortable in your writing style. It feels like I'm reading you talking, if that makes any sense at all. You
Yeah,
know
and I
what I
wanted,
mean? Like,
yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point. I wanted to write it that way because I really, I wrote for TV or for reporting, and so I'm not some literary expert. So I wanted to write it as if I was talking to you, and I skip a little bit, which I guess some writers don't like, going past tense, present tense. But I wanted people to feel like they were with me on some of these stories, whether it's the Red Sox in the World Series or chasing Brady or Mahomes down for a Super Bowl interview, and even in my personal thoughts, reflecting on some things. I wanted to put you in the moment about how I was thinking, because I think it's important to know where I'm coming from sometimes when I'm covering a game or an assignment. Yeah, there's the facts that are right there in front, but then there's those other moments where who you are, I think, affects a little bit the interview or the reporting.
Well, I think it's why we gravitate to you, and you have conversations. You definitely, and you make reference in the book. Larry King, you can tell the people that influence you, the Roy Firestones, people
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
or you let me be part of the conversation. I don't feel like it's the two of you and I'm eavesdropping, and that's a lot harder than people realize. And you're really good at it, Chris.
Well, thank you. I saw that line in a movie that I mentioned about. I learned this early when you're, at 16, a teenager in high school, and you're going to interview Muhammad Ali, right? Who's the greatest, and you don't even realize the impact to start your career this way until later you look back on it. But that line about treat the regular guy like a star or a famous person, and the famous person like a regular guy, and I've always tried to do that, and that way you're not intimidated by anybody, but also you don't overlook anybody who has an interesting story or something to tell in any level of sports, and that's always kind of worked for me. And I think the stars appreciate that too, because they don't want it. Sometimes they get tired of being treated like, oh, I'm someone special. They just want to talk and have a conversation.
Well, you do it well, and I'm glad in the book too that you open up about 2001 with Dale, and I think there's so much. And it was weird because I had completely forgotten about it. One of the funniest moments in NASCAR history is him taking Terry Bradshaw. And I remember that was at a Pontiac Grand Prix. And
Yeah,
he absolutely, Terry Bradshaw was screaming like a 6-year-old girl on the log ride at Disney. And the way he was, didn't even like snap hook it into pit lane or something.
yeah, yeah.
Tell me, Chris, that was the most chaotic lap I've ever seen.
Yeah, that was one of the fun things that I give Fox credit, because after a decade at ESPN going to Fox, after the NFL they added baseball and NASCAR, and they wanted to bring fun to NASCAR, and the good old boys at different end, people were critical and I think skeptical about how we cover it, and that was kind of the approach, to have fun, especially on the pre-race shows, which is my main role, and then even later, years later, we had Jeff Gordon and Clint Boyer, rental car incident. I don't even get that in the book because it happened after I wrote the book, where they get a rental car and race each other in rental cars at Daytona, and go door to door. But it's that kind of fun personality, to try and show that the drivers are kind of like we're talking about regular guys, even if they reach stardom because of their skill or their exposure.
Where where was the moment that it hit you what had happened when Dale passed? There had to be
Well,
a moment for you to stop and go, what just happened? Because
yes, and
fans, we were that way. I was sitting on my couch at home.
right.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was sitting on my couch at home, and my wife was like, "Are you okay?" And I said, "No,
Yeah.
something's really wrong." And I just sat there. I must have sat there for an hour, Chris. And he was my hero. I couldn't process what I'd seen, and I knew in my gut what had happened.
Yeah, a lot of people's hero, and the magnitude. Think about that in any other sport. For the face of the right of the entire sport, Earnhardt, who he was, a 7-time champ at the most of the Super Bowl, the race, for someone to lose their life, and when it happened, the thing that I remember is I was with people, Jeff Hammond, Darrell Waltrip, of course, in the booth. These were guys who had worked and were friends with Earnhardt, competed against him, and they knew right away. And we couldn't say that he had lost his life right away, but they knew right away. The reaction of Ken Schrader, one of the other drivers who was involved, ran over to check on him, as drivers do. We're talking about Earnhardt. We're hitting the wall, which normally, guys can walk away from that. They might be, beat up a little bit, the car destroyed because this didn't roll and catch on fire. But his reaction as he ran towards it was like he looked and ran away, like he couldn't stomach it. That's when they knew. And then I had to, even off the air before we came on the air, because that was during the race when we took a break as the host there, they knew it, but we couldn't say it officially because they had medics there and the family had to be notified. Earnhardt was taken to the hospital. But that, watching them be crushed and us having to try to pull it together on the air and just say, hey, there'll be an official statement at some point was I think a difficult part, knowing the reality of the moment. And the good that came out of that is, as a NASCAR fan, is if there was any good, that he created and forced safer barriers, the head and neck, the Hans device head and neck restraint that has saved a lot of lives and driver injury since that time.
That deserves a wow. The name of the book. Chris Myers with us here. And I'd be remiss if I don't ask you two things. Number one, should the Detroit Lions go out and get Myles Garrett?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say Buffalo or Detroit should trade whatever they have. And look, if you have a healthy Hutchinson, I think the games are a little bit different too. And you're going to have to replace a lot of coaches. You lost, I think, 6 or 7 as we're talking here, and coordinators. But you still have Dan Campbell. But yes, whatever you can do, they've done a lot of nice things in the building of this through the draft and certain players. But yes, if it's at all possible, I know they say they're not trading him, but the right offer, he's available. And it could benefit Cleveland too, because they're not going anywhere with the quarterback they have.
And the second thing is we get ready for the Daytona 500 and watching the race on Sunday night. I got to tell you guys this. We got a guy up the hallway, my friend Ben Perez. He's our marketing director. He's generally not a gearhead NASCAR guy. All he could talk about was, and he goes, that was freaking chaos, and I loved it. He loved it. More people are talking about that damn race at the Gray. And did you guys in the moment, again, you had to stop and go, this is fun. This is old school.
Yeah, and going to a track that's really a neighborhood track. It wasn't the crowd, 17,000, however many you could fit, but a local short track. And short track racing creates that type of racing. I know the super speedways like Daytona, Talladega are different, and they have their own with major crashes. I think their own interest level. But yes, and I wasn't a gearhead to start either when I was younger. I was stick and ball sports, as they called me, but because I was watching football and baseball. But once you experience it, it does. It smells like energy when you walk into a racetrack and hear that. And whether you're a car guy or not, or a gearhead, you don't have to be to appreciate it. It's a different kind of racing. Some people go, it's a bunch. It's like it's like bumper cars. Well, that's fun sometimes, as long as nobody gets hurt. Yeah.
I still want to see them finish the season at Daytona. I don't. I mean, I know NASCAR obviously always evolves and everything else, but it's called it's the Super Bowl of motorsports. It is Daytona. Finish the season there.
Yeah, I almost like the idea. Still, I don't mind starting. Remember, they used to have the Clash at Daytona, which was the warm-up race, and because you have to think about weather. And we caught a break at Bowman Gray, which is in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, because usually the weather's difficult that time of the year. It was cold, but at least it wasn't raining or snowing. But I'm with you on that. And they did rearrange. They're going to look at they're keeping the playoff format the same this year in NASCAR, but they put a group together to study changing it possibly in the future. That's the format, which might change where races are. And I'm with you on that. I think going to, and they used to have, down at Homestead, and we have on the new Fox schedule, we are at the Miami race. I would agree with you on that. I think having it there, and I get what Phoenix brings, and certainly adjusting. You have the weather that's not an issue there, but the kind of race, Daytona, the place that it is, and the people that can get there, I think it would make a difference. I'm with you.
Chris, always a pleasure. Congrats on the book. That deserves a wow. Get on up here to Detroit. Come up for the Detroit Grand Prix. You guys got IndyCar too. Come on up.
Yes. Oh, that's right. Okay.
I'm the track announcer. Come on up. We'll take care of you. I promise. Okay.
It's a deal. We'll have you come by the booth. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chris.
All right.